What's good? It's Woog. Wow. The Gypsy King, Tyson Fury, TKOs Deontay Wilder in the 7th round and collecting the WBC title and maintaining his lineal stake at heavyweight champion. So Tyson Fury is pretty much the man. The other only king of the hill right now is Anthony Joshua with the other 3 belts. In my pre-fight videos, I had mentioned the potential gaining of weight for Tyson Fury and the change of strategy being that he just teamed up with Sugar Hill Stewart in the Kronk Gym, and they were preparing for this fight obviously in a different way than Fury was preparing for the first fight. And I was mentioning the possibility that Tyson Fury could be coming forward in this fight and putting the pressure, putting his body weight on Wilder, letting his hands go, closing the distance so he's not fighting this distance fight that gives Wilder plenty of time to get into rhythm to set up the long-range right hand. If Fury comes forward, now Deontay Wilder has to back up. He's got to move. It's more stress on his legs. It's just a potentially bad situation. I thought that somehow Wilder was going to still find an opportunity to create enough space to let the right hand go. Maybe in a moment of laziness or a lack of focus moment for Fury, maybe that would present its opportunity for Wilder to do so. But, you know, from the onset, from the opening bell, Fury was coming forward. He immediately stressed Wilder out with his activity, with his aggression, with him putting him in those headlocks continuously, which you cannot understate how much that drains the opponent's legs and their back, their neck. Everything starts to tighten up. Mosley used to talk about that when fighters like Floyd Mayweather would put Mosley's head under his arm and push down. Sometimes you'll even see fighters just drop to a knee. It's not a knockdown, and it allows him to get back up, but it's sometimes better to just drop to your knee. It's almost a veteran move when somebody has you tucked under and is making you support their body weight, just fall to the ground. It forces the ref to tell the other guy to stop doing it. And yes, Kenny Bayless did take a point away from Fury for committing those headlocks. But it also, when you just drop to the ground, you no longer have to support the guy's body weight. It's better than trying to keep your feet up and carry this weight on top of your neck, your back. But he was doing this continuously. I thought that the first round was close. That one could have gone either way. I felt like Wilder won the second round, but there was a moment with about 10 seconds to go where Wilder threw a punch. He was off balance. Fury caught Wilder off balance, kind of knocked him into the corner, and that's when they got in that little scuffle in the corner with Bayless breaking him up as the bell sounded. I thought that something happened in that last 10 seconds that had Wilder kind of questioning how tough of a fight this was about to be. And then obviously in the third round, he badly hurt and dropped Wilder with a punch that you could argue went upside his head, kind of behind his head. It was one of those where in the heat of the moment, the exchange is happening. So you can't. It's very tough to call an illegal shot like that when the guy's dipping down in real time, the punch is coming, and it kind of clips him up here. It wasn't like they were tied up and Fury targeted the back of Wilder's head, or it wasn't something where Wilder's whole body was turned. Fury had a second to notice that and launch a punch at the back of his head. It wasn't an egregiously illegal punch, but it was a technically illegal punch, just based on where it landed, but not based on intent. So Wilder goes down. He's clearly rattled. You know, I kind of saw in his eye in that third round, even before the knockdown, that Wilder looked a little bit groggy, like he was affected by a punch prior and was stressed out bodily by how much his legs were being drained so early in the fight based on somebody who weighs 40 pounds more than him's aggression and activity towards him. It's a lot to thwart that attack, man. You're giving up 40 pounds. Plus, Wilder was heavier than he'd ever been before. So Fury is putting his weight on Wilder, and Wilder is having to support not only Fury's weight, but more of his own weight than he's ever had to support before. Beautiful game plan for Tyson Fury. He obviously knocked Wilder down in that third round. Wilder, in my opinion, never recovered. He never got his feet back under him. He looked like he was sort of over his skis. When he would take a step forward or take a step back, it's like when your leg falls asleep and you don't have complete feeling and you're just kind of clumsily walking forward and back. When Fury would turn and throw another couple punches, Wilder was so slow to turn and respond with him. Fury was just a step ahead and then would let his punches go and would often land cleanly. And anytime he was landing on Wilder, even with a jab, because the Sugar Hill and the Kronk Gym, they basically were training Fury on throwing this step-in jab where you're not just flicking the jab out, you're stepping into it and getting a lot more power into it. So Fury's putting his weight into his jabs, not only his right hands and left hooks, but even the jabs. So when he would jab Wilder, you would see Wilder's head like go back in slow motion and his whole body would kind of fall back. And there were other times where the ropes were the only thing catching Wilder and keeping him on his feet. Sometimes when Wilder's back would hit the rope, he would actually be resting his arm on the rope to keep himself up. He was really struggling from the end of the second round through the third round, the knockdown, and for the rest of the fight. It's actually amazing that Wilder showed as much heart as he did with as much difficulty as he was having in that ring. There were definitely moments where he could have found a way to exit the fight. He didn't want to do that. He looked like he was really willing to go out on the shield, and thank God his corner threw the towel in. Could they have thrown it in 2 rounds prior? Probably, but they didn't want to see it go beyond that 7th round. Wilder was again going back into the corner. Fury shot a short, straight right hand right through Wilder's guard and then started opening up again. Wilder really wasn't responding with a whole lot of heat. And Wilder, because his legs were gone, even when he would try to deploy the right, first, he wasn't ever given a chance to really set anything up. Fury never gave Wilder a chance to set a rhythm, because he was coming forward on Wilder, making Wilder have to deal with that. But even when Wilder would let a right hand go, his legs were so shot that it was just kind of a lazily looping punch. It didn't look like it was generating the same sizzle as it would have been in earlier rounds or as it usually does when we see Wilder throw it. Very tough fight for Wilder. Great night for Fury. Fury is currently the king of the heavyweight division. Sugar Hill Stewart is looking like a genius because of the game plan that they came in with. Brilliant, especially given the opponent. One thing that I will say is I mentioned Wilder's heart and him being able to survive those 4 rounds between the 3rd and the 7th round when he was clearly like, you could see it in his face, in his eyes. He was groggy. He was not together. Plus, he appeared to have a busted eardrum, a ruptured eardrum, and he was bleeding profusely from his ear. He looked like he might have also suffered a broken jaw. His mouth was open. His whole side of his face started to swell up. His eyes looked like they weren't even like the same size related to one another. So that usually tells that there's some concussive-like brain activity that's kind of misfiring in the background. That's never a good sign. Glad they stopped the fight. This was a very brutal fight, and I think Wilder's going to take 9 to 12 months minimum recovering from this fight. It's going to be about a year, I think, before we see Wilder in the ring again. I hope it is. And he's 34 right now, so he's only getting older. Can you teach him new tricks on how to handle this particular style, especially giving up this type of weight? I don't know how many more adjustments you can make in Wilder's career. I do think that he has fights left in him, and I think that there's a chance we could see the rubber match, the 3rd match between him and Fury. And he still has a puncher's chance in any fight, but damn, this was a really, really brutal beatdown. As I was discussing Wilder's heart, I also see the meme culture that, proliferates on social media where people just have these disrespectful images and memes of the moment where Wilder's taking a punch and his lip is like flying this way. It's a joking culture. I just don't think that boxing is really the sport to make light of these people's efforts. I also see the public turning on Wilder like, he's a fraud. No, he just lost the fight. Look, we knew that he was a technically flawed fighter in a lot of ways. We knew that several fights ago. But we also knew that he had this atomic bomb of a right hand that he was able to launch and land on great fighters. He obviously landed it twice on Fury in their first fight, dropped him twice. And now all of a sudden, Wilder's a fraud because he loses a fight against the highest caliber heavyweight fighter you could imagine. Look, we've never seen a guy 6'9" like Fury, who's as coordinated as he is and is as gifted with both hands from a conventional or a southpaw stance, fighting forward, coming in like he did against Wilder here, or backing up and circling and operating behind a jab like he's done in several other fights, notably against Wladimir Klitschko and against Wilder in their first fight, okay? Fury is a problem for anybody, and to suggest that all of a sudden, you know, Wilder's a bum or Wilder deserves some sort of disrespect or questioning his toughness or anything like that is foolishness. It's ultra moronic, and I wish that people would pay more attention and understand what's actually taking place in the ring between these legendary gladiators who are really risking it all and putting it all out there, putting it all on the line. I think that the fighters deserve much more from the public than that. So where do we go from here? You know, unfortunately, given Tyson Fury's patterns of mental health and of depression and of having to find a purpose in order to even live day to day, he talks about the constant struggle with his mental health and the fact that he was able to root himself in this purposeful fight and put all of his attention into preparing and training for this, to where, you know, in the pre-fights, Fury was saying, I've done all I can to prepare for this fight. There's nothing else I could do. I have prepared the absolute best that I can for this. So when the lights are off and the fight's over, the moment's gone, you've scaled the mountain once again. We remember how Fury responded to scaling the mountain the last time, when his sole purpose in life was to beat Wladimir Klitschko for the heavyweight championship. Fury was the underdog. I remember Richard Dwyer called Fury to win that fight, but he was the underdog, and he ends up beating Wladimir Klitschko, winning almost every round of that fight, shocking the world, and then singing Aerosmith's "Don't Want to Miss a Thing" in the ring after the fight, like he's saying Don McLean's American Pie at the end of this one. Showman in the highest order. But once he scaled the mountaintop the first time and he wins the championship against Wladimir Klitschko, he goes off the rails. He starts doing a bunch of cocaine, drinking heavily, going into deep depression, suicidal thoughts, and gains about 150 to 200 pounds. He's closer to 400 pounds than he is to 250 or 300. So it was all bad for him. He makes his recovery, has a couple comeback fights after almost 2 years of being out of the ring. Then he has his first fight with Wilder. It's the classic draw that he wins almost every round, gets knocked down twice, and then they give it a draw, even though Fury should have won that decision. Then he has another couple fights. First against Tom Schwartz, where he beats him up and finishes him within like 5 rounds. Then he's got the fight with Otto Wallin, where he gets that monumental cut early in the fight, ends up fighting this savage in-close fight where instead of working behind the jab and circling and boxing from distance, he puts his cut up on Wallin, so Wallin can't target the cut anymore, and he starts digging to the body and just going to work. Savage for the rest of the fight. Wins that decision. I thought Fury got hurt late in that fight, which influenced my thinking into feeling like Wilder was going to win this fight, because I just saw Fury get hurt again against Wallin late in that fight. But I also didn't want to rule out the possibility of Fury by KO, TKO, and I felt like that was the second most likely scenario. But now that he's scaled the mountaintop, again, how does he respond? Does he get back into training? I don't think so. I think he takes a long break. I don't think he immediately takes this Anthony Joshua fight next. I think he takes some time off. I think there's going to be maybe another 9 months before we see Fury in the ring again. I hope he doesn't fall into a depression. I hope he finds some other purpose. I hope he finds some sort of stability and a way of marching forward with life, even if you're not actively training for this momentous occasion. I hope he finds this inner peace where he can just exist without having the dramatic highs and lows. I do think they'll eventually get a Fury versus Anthony Joshua fight together. There are a lot of politics to be worked out. Eddie Hearn and DAZN, they have a non-pay-per-view model where they need subscriptions. So how do you then juxtapose that with Fury's ESPN deal, where ESPN Plus also wants a lot of subscriptions, but this was a ESPN Fox co-promotion, but with the Fury Wilder 2 fight, where it was a Fox pay-per-view or ESPN pay-per-view, but it was a co-promotion. I don't know how you work out whether to have a Fury versus Anthony Joshua fight on ESPN pay-per-view or on DAZN non-pay-per-view. They're going to have to work out the business. They're going to have to work out the cuts. Fury's saying he has no interest in this fight. He said, Anthony Joshua could have been in this ring tonight. But no, it took a warrior like Deontay Wilder. It took a warrior like myself to take the biggest fights, the best fighting the best. That's been the mantra. That's been the slogan going into this fight. Let's get the promoters together. Let's make the biggest fights with the biggest fighters like we want to see at 147 between Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. I hope Errol Spence gets better from that wreck of a car accident. Nothing's guaranteed there. I don't know if we'll ever see the same Errol Spence. I hope he's okay, and if he can continue at the highest level and perform the way we're used to seeing Spence perform, so much more power to him. But there's a healthy doubt in that. But the bottom line is the promoters need together. They need to make these fights happen. And I don't know how this is going to work out between Team DAZN, Eddie Hearn, Anthony Joshua, and then Team ESPN, Tyson Fury, Bob Arum, Top Rank. But what we do know is that Tyson Fury is now the king of the hill. He's the WBC champ. He's the lineal champ. He's the Ring Magazine champ. Yes, Anthony Joshua holds the other 3 titles. He's probably going to end up dumping one of those titles. I don't think he's going to hold on to the WBO, the IBF, and the WBA because it's too much of a schedule to have to defend your title, all 3 titles, against their respective mandatory challengers. That's a very tough schedule to uphold. But man, I think we were treated to a hell of a night in boxing. This was brutal, especially if you're a Deontay Wilder fan. And just generally, you want to see the well-being of the fighters first and foremost preserved. I don't love the idea of the post-fight in-ring interviews when fighters have gotten badly beaten. I think they need to immediately be on their way to the hospital. Props to Deontay Wilder for sticking around for that. I mean, the guy is such a warrior. I love Fury as a person. I love Wilder as a person. It's always tough when you see somebody invest so much and then come up short. I really hope that Deontay Wilder is able to reconcile this loss in his mind because he had this image, this king-like image of what his destiny was, how much pressure he was able to take on and put on himself to fight the best. Between these Tyson Fury fights, he also fought Dominic Breazeale, who, say what you want, is no joke, in the rematch against Luis Ortiz. You want to talk about taking risks. There's no amount of props in the world that can be given to Deontay Wilder for his strength of schedule, fight by fight. The guy's, it's unbelievable. I hope he's okay. I hope he's able to make his return. If it suits him health-wise, boxing is a young man's sport, and it's a dangerous, dangerous sport. So I would have no problems with him not returning. I do think he will return. I don't know how much he could retool his game. He could still beat just about anybody on the planet, assuming he's not a shot fighter from this experience last night. Let me know what you think about the fight. Let me know what you think about the state of the heavyweight division and about both of these fighters going forward, what you expect from them. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in. One more quick note about the fight that I forgot to mention is that Wilder does have a rematch clause, and it's his decision on whether he's going to exercise that rematch clause. I have my doubts. I think he really took a beating, and it might behoove him to just take the time off and fully recover rather than jumping right back in the ring, assuming that you're going to get a different result. He might get a different result. I mean, he always has a puncher's chance against Fury or against anybody else, but for him to exercise that rematch clause, he's got to exercise it, I believe, in the next 30 days or something. He might want to hold off on that. He really might want to hold off on that because if he goes back in the ring with Fury and it's the same or similar result, that could be career-defining, career-ending in a way. I already think that Wilder's career is somewhat... Look, he's 34 years old, and yes, you can age and remain in the heavyweight division for longer than you can in some of these other lighter divisions, but this was everything from what happened with the ear to what happened with the jaw to what I suspect happened just brain-wise, concussion-wise, he might want to take some significant time off. But he does have a rematch clause if he chooses to exercise it. Just wanted to lay that out there. And, yeah, thanks again for tuning in.